So I'm going to introduce our theme for the session, which is being called a lineage of inspiration, and is really sort of exploring some of the people, historical people, that have influenced the kind of flavour of Triratna, of what we teach here, what we teach at the Saturday class, or any other places that you go to in Triratna, from Buddhism through the ages, and to sort of explore and introduce you to some of those people that have brought those flavours in through history. So I thought, first of all, I'd just do one of the traditional ways of starting a talk, which is to look at the words and look at the etymology. And so I looked at the etymology of lineage, and it's really not rocket science. It's line and age. So the Latin is literally saying there's a line and it goes through time. Yeah, it goes through history. It's through age, which I thought was rather neat, actually. This sort of a line through time, and inspiration. I'm sure many of you know means literally, again, it's simple, to inspire, to breathe in, and just how much breath means life to us, doesn't it? When you say you breathe life into something, or, you know, when we're born, we take our first breath. Breath means life. So inspiration is about bringing life to something, or bringing something to life. So this is a lineage, a line through history of things coming into life, things being breathed into life, and that being passed on through time. And this is in particular a spiritual lineage. And a sort of, we're going to be looking at, in a way, our spiritual ancestors, or our spiritual heritage, even that which has been passed down, those that have passed on the breath, or, to use another sort of metaphor, have passed on the flame from one to the other through time. And why is that important? You know, why is that of any interest, really? I mean, actually, we've got lots of great teachers these days, you know, and it's incredibly accessible. And here we are on Zoom, and there's things on video and books everywhere, and teachers left, right, and centre. So why, in a way, is it important to sort of to look back? And also, you know, why is it important? Because there's such an emphasis now on the idea of, I think, the mistaken idea, in a way, that Buddhism is just about being in the present moment. You know, it's just about being here now. So why on earth look back into the past? Well, there is an element of Buddhism which is about being in the present, which is about being here now. But, and I think the sort of overuse of that has maybe come from something that I've been very part of, which is secular mindfulness, where we sort of emphasize that a lot. But it isn't the only aspect of mindfulness. Mindfulness has two components in Buddhism. One is sati, and that is being present, being aware now. But the other is sampajñāna, and that is recollection, memory, context, purpose. You know, it's a sense of not just being present, but also, what does that mean? You know, where is that going? Where does that come from? So, it's not just the present moment, and it's not just that purpose is then tacked onto it, but it's part of the present. So that is part of conditionality. Some of you may have heard that word bandied about quite a bit when we've talked about Buddhism. It's very, very crucial. Oops, someone's fallen out and they're falling in again. Here we go. I'll let them in. That what goes before affects what happens now, and what happens now affects what happens next. You know, you can't sort of get away from that that kind of role of conditionality. So similarly, what has come before in a Buddhist sense, in a spiritual sense, has kind of created what we are now. And what we are now, us who are practicing, we are creating the future of Buddhism. So it is important. And in Buddhism, sort of generally, there is a sort of a sense of importance around, you know, who your teacher is and who your teacher's teacher was, and what is the flavor of what you practice. What is that particular flow of inspiration that's gone from one sort of spiritual birth, you know, to another, one awakening to another. And of course, all Buddhist lineages go back to the historical Buddha. So they actually do all go back to 2,500 years ago, to the Buddha himself. But each will have its particular flavor, depending on, you know, who's taken it up, who's practiced it, and what they've passed on, that conditionality, what have they passed on into the future. So it's not static. And the Tibetans in particular are very keen on lineage, and they have made this idea of lineage into something that's very sort of graphic and visual, which is, you know, what the Tibetan Buddhism often does. It's so effective in many ways. And they created this idea of lineage trees. So they would paint these amazing paintings of all the little teachers, the one that started it all, and there'd be the Buddha, and then all the other disciples that moved it on here or there, that brought it back to, you know, to now. And so you'll see these paintings with lots of little figures on, and that represents their particular lineage. And that would be something that a new, you know, monk or nun would learn. So they'd learn something about the particular sort of emphasis that their school had. It would be something that they would meditate on and draw inspiration from themselves, confidence from themselves. And we too in Sri Ratna have what we call the refuge tree. So this too is a lineage tree. So a you know, a representation of our lineage done kind of visually to do the same with, you know, that shows our particular flavor, where it's come from, that people do contemplate, study, meditate on. And so, yeah, even sort of new kind of movements like us would have got a lineage. And even the really old ones, the Tibetan ones, even that's not that old in Buddhism, really, in some ways, but even they had to start somewhere. You know, they started at some point, they were a new kind of sect or whatever, and they would start to develop their own lineage. So we have that, and it's a refuge tree that has lots of the different sorts of aspects and influences on it. So I'm going to show you a picture of one of them, if I can get this together. Da, da, da. There you are. Can you see that? Dario, you're the only person I can see, so nod if you can see it. That's great. For some reason. So this is one version of our refuge tree, one painting of it. You know, the figures are always the same, just about anyway, on it. And sort of just gives you an idea of that sort of sense of, you know, this tree. I mean, actually, it's like a giant kind of lotus plant, isn't it? But it's called a tree traditionally. And at the center, you've got the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha. So he's the core of it all. And you've got all sorts of different things. We've got our own teacher from Triratna, which is Sangharakshita, who's there, who's kind of, he is a kind of gateway for us into all this historical teaching. So he's the one that's kind of pointing us towards it. And in a way, he has brought these different flavors into Triratna. And the people here are like his actual sort of personal teachers that he's had. There's one here, Dado Rinpoche, and some of you might remember that we actually did a whole session on Dado Rinpoche, really fantastic and wonderful sort of heart teacher from Tibet that Sangharakshita studied with for many years, and some up there too. And then on one side, you've got what's called the sort of the Arya Sangha, which are the Buddha's early teachers. So these are some of the sort of chief disciples of the Buddha from 2,500 years ago. You've got the nun Dharmadina there, and sort of, Sariputra, Moggallana, sort of various important figures. And then on the other side, you've got from the Mahayana, you've got the archetypal bodhisattvas, so the sort of the more sort of imaginal, mythic Buddhas that you would meditate on, that represent kind of particular qualities of the enlightened mind that are very much from the Mahayana school, and that would include the Vajrayana, the Tibetan, for those of you that want to know that sort of thing. And they're, really colourful. I love that contrast actually between this sort of these lovely, lithe, young, colourful figures that are all kind of magic, and then you've got these sort of more sort of old, gnarled, kind of real historical figures with their old robes and their dirty feet and their, real bodies. So it's quite a nice kind of contrast, I think, there. You've got here, so these are the Buddha, the teachers of the past. So these are kind of very influential teachers, some of them, because there are many influential teachers in Buddhism, but these are some of them from the different schools of Buddhism. And these ones in particular, their sort of influence or flavor is seen in Triratna. And people might sort of particularly draw from one or the other, or you might just crop up. You're at a puja and you hear a reading. Maybe some of you might know the Song of Meditation is a reading that we often use, and oh, that's Hakwin, who's in there somewhere, is a Japanese teacher who is there with much more than just that reading. But those little things kind of get fed in and almost become part of the fabric of Triratna. And maybe we don't know about the story behind them, the person behind them. So that's partly also why I thought it would be so interesting to really sort of go into who these people are and what's their history, what's their story. And then at the top here, we've got the Jnana Buddhas, again, archetypal Buddhas, and Vajrasattva, again, another archetypal Buddha. So it's a very sort of full picture. There's a lot going on there. There's a lot of influence there. So basically, what is it that sort of comes from these figures? What is this lineage? And Sangharakshita has talked about there being sort of three different kind of streams to this lineage. And one is a lineage of teachings. So teachings that come from all these different areas, all these different people. And the other is practices. So there are practices that we use that have been passed down. And the third one he thought was a lineage of inspiration. And he said he thought that was the most important aspect of the lineage. That's the one that brings the other two to life, as it were. Practices without inspiration just become sort of dull and habitual. and teachings without inspiration become dry or dogmatic. So you need that life being breathed into those things. And of course, you know, we can't always be inspired, but we can do things to help us to be more inspired, and kind of being receptive and open to these teachings and these lives and these inspirations that are being passed down through the ages. We're sort of opening to their inspiration, can help us to sort of catch it. You know, the saying that Buddhism is caught, not taught. You know, it's a saying that's used for other things too, but it very much applies to Buddhism. It's kind of, yeah, it can't just be taught like you get a workbook on Buddhism. Well, you could, and I'm sure there are, but actually, really, what's most important is that you sort of catch it. And yeah, so we're kind of looking at these both in terms of trying to sort of find out about them and find out about their lives. So kind of getting some inspiration, some confidence from how they got to where they were. So often the stories behind these figures they're not sort of born Buddhas, you know. Not even the Buddha was born a Buddha. Even the Buddha had to sort of go through a whole process, a whole sort of struggle, actually, of going up the wrong pathways, you know, of trying things and them not working, of, you know, he had to go through a process in order to become the Buddha. And very much the same with them. And personally, I love hearing about their stories and their struggles and their sort of breakthroughs and their madness, some of them, and their eccentricity, and also their sort of normalness, you know, the whole lot there. And then also, you know, their awakenings, so their expressions of, you know, pure inspiration when they have had breakthroughs, where they have opened up to something more, and that's what they've kind of passed down. So they've kind of passed down their struggle and their achievement, their inspiration. And that's what we can open up to. And it's really like a big treasure chest of these different possibilities. And I don't know the stories of all these characters here. I know some of them, and every time I learn about a new one, I'm absolutely intrigued and sort of drawn into their history. Yeah, and I suppose I'll come back, I think. There we are. I'm back again. I'm back again for me anyway. You're back for me. They are. There was a sort of little sort of quote from Marla that I put on the WhatsApp, which I'm just going to find again, if I can. Notice board. Oh, that was it. Tradition is the handing on of the fire, not the worship of ashes. I mean, that's just brilliant, isn't it? And I was thinking how much this is not the worship of ashes. But I think I thought it was. I have to say, I used to think, what is the point of lineage? You know, what is the point of, is it that we just need to kind of have some sort of spiritual status, that we're having to prove something? And I guess, you know, lineage can mean that in a kind of ordinary sense, can't it? You know, very much in history, when you talk about people's heritage, it was about bloodlines and, you know, how royal you were, or how high up in the tribe you were, or, you know, this is so not about that. You know, it was very much like that in the Buddhist time. You know, the sort of bloodline lineage was incredibly important, and caste was part of that. And the Buddha was absolutely radical about caste, and he was completely uninterested no one was either too privileged or not privileged enough to join the Sangha. And once you were the Sangha, you were part of that family, that great family. Sangha means spiritual family. So he had no interest in caste, in a sense. All humans were humans with potential, humans that could be awake. And that's what we had in common. So it absolutely isn't about that. However, one's kind of personal human ancestry, it can be included into it. Is it sort of included into our practice too, isn't it? But not in a sort of statusful way. But I was just thinking, when people do the practice of meditation that they do with this refuge tree, one of the first things you do is you imagine your mother, I think, over your left shoulder and your father over your right shoulder. So you've got the tree in front of you and all this kind of Buddhism, but then standing behind you are your mother and father, and standing behind them is every man and every woman that there is. And I thought that was quite interesting in a way, that you sort of take them with you. And I know quite a lot of people that sort of feel that they do work with their, what they might call their family karma, what they sort of, their family patterns, their family conditioning that's maybe been passed down from one ancestor to another. And that part of their practice is a kind of working with that, a sort of freeing that up. And so we do sort of include that human element in there somehow. We are who we are because partly where we came from, but we are transforming that too through our practice and through this engagement with the tree. Yeah, so we bring that history to this new possibility, a new way of being with our history. So, yeah, we're going to explore over the next however long, just some of the people from that tree. And basically what I did was I asked some order members who they'd like to talk about. So I didn't sort of do any guiding or directing, not particularly, and they got to choose who they would like to. So it's not really in any particular sort of order or anything. And I just wanted them to introduce them to you so we can find out more about each figure. And through that, I'm sure we will also find out about that person themselves who is introducing them. So through that process, of why you pick someone, why you find them inspiring yourself or moving yourself, also says a lot about your practice. So I'm hoping that we're going to get kind of both there, someone's personal practice in a way and about this historical figure. And I'll just tell you a few that we've got coming up, just to sort of give you an idea of this sort of this, I sort of want to say motley crew, but that's really not terribly good, is it? I wish I had another word for it. They're a real mixture. They're a real sort of, they're so different. They're so particular, all these different people. So I might just bring the tree in again, just to, there we are. There we are. Yep. So we're starting next week, I'm very pleased to say, with Satchadaya. And he is going to be talking about, well, really where we should be starting and where we are starting, which is with the historical Buddha. So he's going to talk about the Buddha and, why is he, in a sense, at the heart of the tree? This man 2,500 years ago, why is it still relevant to be looking back to him when we could just go on video and go to a teacher that's living now? So why bother thinking about the Buddha? So we're going to start with who is the heart of the refuge tree. Then the next week, well, what we've got is a nice little selection of early Buddhism. So we've got the Buddha, and then we've got Maitri Shuri, our very own Maitri Shuri, who's here tonight, talking about Ananda, who was the Buddha's cousin, who was the Buddha's closest companion, who is the kind of Buddhist everyman. He is the person in the suttas who often ask the questions to the Buddha that we would ask, and often ask questions, and the Buddha goes, no, it's not like that. You got it wrong, Ananda. It's like this. But he's very kind of relatable too, and he's a very sort of loved character, loved person. So we're going to hear more about him and his extraordinary qualities as well. And he is one of these here. I don't know exactly which one he is. I'm going to say he's that one. It's that's, you can see my little cursor, can't you, where it's going? Can you see it?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so he's one of these early Buddhist disciples. Then we've got Moggallana, who is one of the Buddha's chief disciples. So he and Sariputra were like the top two who helped the Buddha form his Dharma in a way, helped him to kind of communicate it. And so he's very well known for this friendship with Sariputra. So he's kind of, that's one of the things he's known for, is his friendship, his sort of spiritual friendship with Moggallana. He was said to have magical powers, psychic powers, and it was an extraordinary person with an extraordinary life with it's a sad ending, but I won't give that away. Anyway, we've got Amrita Mati coming and talking about him, who's done, I think she's given 3 talks to us. She's from Shrewsbury. She's a wonderful speaker, and she loves the early Buddhist Sangha. And then we've got a face-to-face class, and I think it really is great that we've got these early Buddhist characters, and then we've got Parinirvana Day evening. So that's what we'll be celebrating on that face-to-face class, is the death of the Buddha. So, it really does connect up with the historical Buddha and the early Sangha. The next week, we've got Shantideva. There you go. I think he's there. An Indian poet, scholar, but again with an interesting background. He was a student at Nalanda University, and which was, a thriving Buddhist university, ancient. I've been to the ruins there, which is extraordinary, to walk around the walls of what was this, you knew was full of practicing Buddhists, different schools, different approaches, must have been so alive and buzzing. He was part of that, and but was thought to be incredibly lazy. They used to call him Lazy Bum. Apparently, that was his nickname. And it was said that his three powers were, now what was it? Eating, sleeping, and defecating. So he wasn't thought terribly well of by his fellow students, but then he surprised them all one night, or one day after the night where he had to give a teaching, and they discovered there was much more to him than they thought there was. So Nagabodhi is going to be talking about him, and Nagabodhi has done for many years actually, drawn from Shantideva, and from Shantideva's work, very well-known work, the Bodhicharya Avatara, where we get our sevenfold puja from in Triratna. And there's, again, so much to him and his teachings and his life. The next week we have Nagabodhi again, actually then discussing Sangharakshita, who is down there. It's going to be a sort of live stream from Adhisthana on that Wednesday, so we won't be having a class, but
all those that want to will sort of joining in with the bigger group to watch this interview with him at what he'll be at Adhisthana, talking about Sangharakshita and about his new book about Sangharakshita. So again, another figure on the tree. And then, oh yeah, we're going to have another face-to-face class, and I'm going to do an evening on the Therigatha. It's one thing you might notice, if you haven't, well, you surely have done, that it is mainly men up there. You've actually, and that is there in the history of Buddhism. You know, most of the teachers were men. It is different now, and it is going to be different. I think that's one of the flames that's now being passed on to women. But then it was very much like every other religion in that the women didn't tend to have those roles so much. However, there is this incredible anthology of women's voices, women's poems, again, from the really early Sangha, the first Sangha of the Buddha. And I love those poems, and I love the sense of those women who were so brave to go forth and live in the forest and, just practice. Incredibly courageous, extraordinary women, often from quite ordinary backgrounds. And we've only got one of them on the tree, that's Dharma Dinner, because she created such an extraordinary teaching. But there were many more of them. So I'm going to have an evening sort of dedicated to those women on the early Sangha. Then we've got some more sort of Zen people. We've got Hakwin, we've got Vidya Kaya from Kent, who's going to give us a talk on Hakwin. Some of you might have heard a little bit about him already because I gave a talk about him a while ago. But an extraordinary Zen master who had a fear of hell from a very young age. He went and heard a teaching and heard about the hells and was absolutely terrified he was going to be cast into hell. So started practicing at a young age with an incredible sort of drive. But got over that. It took a very, very long time to get over that fear and actually start practicing for a different reason, which was how he ended up. You know, it wasn't so much from fear, it was for love and a sense of interconnection and a sense of wanting to practice for the sake of all beings. But he had such an extraordinary life, and there's a lot written about him because he was, I think, 17th century. And so there's a great deal written about his journey by him and by others. And when he did gain awakening, there was this sort of outpouring of creativity from him, of art, of calligraphy, of poetry, of teaching. An amazing, amazing character. And I think that's probably him. He's got the Zen stick, which they used to whack you with if you were sort of wilting in your meditation, just to, liven you up a bit. So that's him. Next figure that Shradagita from London is introducing us to is Dogen, is another one of these sort of intense Japanese Zen teachers. Very much formative teacher of the Soto Zen school, a very very earthy, very let's think what the word is, pithy, no nonsense kind of guy. So we're going to hear more about him from Shradagita. And then we have Paramartha, who lives at Adhisthana in Herefordshire, who's going to give a talk on Milarepa. Milarepa is an amazing guy. He was a Tibetan. As a young man, he
through the need for revenge, he had an intensive kind of feeling of revenge. He murdered some people who had wronged him and his family, and then realized he needed to practice to do something about this. And there's wonderful stories about the relationship between him and the teacher who took him on, who could see how urgent it was that he actually changed his mind from this sort of karmic weight that he had from murdering these people, and the kind of quite hard process that he went through in order to transform himself. And he became a yogi who lived in the mountains, who taught by singing songs. Songs were very often about impermanence, about happiness, about freedom. Quite an extraordinary, wonderful yogi. Those of you that were there for the open day, the puja at the end of the open day, I sung a song, and that song was one of Milarepa's songs. They are sort of gorgeous songs that have real meaning and depth in them. So he has quite a story, and that is one I'm really looking forward to. Then we have our retreat for those of us that are going, and the retreat is very much around this area. It's looking at the teacher. What kind of relationship do we have to the idea of a teacher, to the idea of sort of receiving something, to being receptive to someone that might kind of know more than us, or and that's very much what this tree is representing. These people have been through something that maybe we haven't yet in terms of their awakening experience. And how is it for us to open up to that? So it's great that it kind of ties in nicely with what we're doing. And then our last talk is going to be by our very own Kamini, who gives absolutely lovely talks, really beautiful talks. And that fits in really nicely with the fact that she's giving a talk on Ryokin, who is a Japanese poet, Buddhist poet, absolutely loved by the Japanese. I mean, just a gorgeous man, beautiful poetry, very human, someone that liked his sake, that liked playing with the children from the village, but had great wisdom of heart and mind. And again, another extraordinary story. So just going to come back again. There we are. So we've got a kind of a rich spread there of people to kind of open up to and see what do we connect to, what do they bring that means something to us, that might bring to life something in us, and that's really what we're sort of looking for. So there's that that shows us something of what Triratna is, that shows us is a doorway into Buddhism, into the richness that's there. But I thought also, I've talked about kind of bloodline heritage that we might have, but also, as well as that more communal refuge tree, another sort of type of lineage would be our sort of personal spiritual lineage. And that might be something interesting for you yourself to explore. And that is, what influences, what inspirers, helpers, enablers have kind of brought us to where we are now. What would our tree look like? If we were to make a tree, who would be sitting on the branches? Where would they be? What constellation would that be? And that might include, people from the past. It might include contemporary people, real people, unreal people, just anybody that has pointed the way. And it might be interesting to kind of notice that, to explore that yourself, what, because it gives us sort of sense of the flavor of our own practice. And I think the more we can know our own practice, the more we can know how to work with it, how to inspire ourselves, how to keep ourselves nourished, what works for us. I thought if I did a tree, who would I have on it? I'd probably start with my granny. My granny would be on the tree for sure, with her, she was a Catholic. So it's not necessarily that, but she had a definite kind of sense of, she introduced me to a sort of sense of inner faith, of something a bit mysterious, because it wasn't just a dogmatic kind of Catholicism. She was definitely experienced something I could see that was different, that I got a whiff of. So I'd have her there. I'd have the punk band, the Crass, who, when I first learned to meditate, I was 19. I was still kind of interested in that sort of thing. I went to interview the Crass, and they lived in a different way. They lived in a very ethical way. They lived in a really thoughtful way. They still do in Epping. They've still got a really, really old house that they live in as a commune. And apparently anybody can turn up at the doorstep and they will let you in and have a cup of tea. And they have been there for years and years and years. And they pointed me towards the LBC. They sort of said, yeah, that's good. I was already getting involved there, but they showed me something else and pointed to it. So they'd be there. The Kraus would be there. My first teachers, Parami and Dhammarathi, would be there. And then formative people. My sister would be there. Kaimani would be there, who I knew from when I was 19 and was part of my practice, my process, my formative process. A singing teacher that used to come to the LBC, the London Buddhist Centre, once a year, and taught me something about how to be fully alive, fully unafraid. Through singing, but about life. He'd be there. Martin Luther King would be there. Trungpa would be there. Bhante, of course, would be there. The Buddha would be there. Padmasambhava would be there. My spiritual mentors, Dhammadinna and Parami, would be there. So all these people would be there. And as I was thinking this, I just felt such a sense of gratitude, like, God, how lucky I was to have just touch these people and their extraordinary qualities, whether it was from far away or, having close relationships with them. They all influenced me and helped me. And I was just sort of, to end, I was just thinking, I'd had, a while ago, I had a conversation with a couple of order members from Stroud, who are not that far away at this very moment, and we were talking about why we wanted to teach. Why do we teach Buddhism? We, there are other options. The comfortable life, or just practicing maybe in a different way. But we seem to want to, and all three of us, these two different conversations, but all three of us said it was gratitude for what we had received from other people in Sri Ratna, and that was really strong, that there was this really strong sense of gratitude, a real sort of feeling of wanting to then pass that on. That if you feel really grateful for something, that you feel, gosh, I got this opportunity, these people gave me these conditions, gave me this attention, enabled me with these practices. You just want to give it back, don't you? Into the world. And I was really struck by how strongly all three of us felt that. It wasn't a head thing. It wasn't like, oh, it's a duty, I must pass it back. It was like from the heart. You could, it was a very strong impulse. So I was just sort of thinking, as we open to these over the weeks, these figures of inspiration, etc., you know, what our spiritual lineage looks like. And maybe this is going to enrich that. And also then, what do we want to pass on? You know, what do we want to sort of give to the world? What flame do we want to hand on? Because in a sense, we do give to the world by whatever we're doing now. It's kind of having an effect. We are the conditions of the present moment that are creating the future. So spiritually, what is it that we want to pass on? And I think that's somehow felt really important to sort of say that is this looking back actually is about looking forward too. It's about passing on the flame and not the ashes. So that's me talk. That's my introduction. You know, it's quite full. When Cute's quite full, but then it's quite a big tree, isn't it? You know, there's quite a bit to it. I really hope you can come and join in and find out about these different figures and meet these different order members as well, some of which we know and some of which are coming from other places, and through the magic of Zoom we are having them. So we just got 5 minutes or so. So I just wondered if anyone had any comments or anything that you want to say. I know it's like deathly, isn't it, when you say that everybody goes completely silent. So, no, don't make me.
I had a question, just something I noticed. I don't think you, forgive me if you did, but I don't think you mentioned it. On the refuge tree that you put up, on either side, there are these shadowy figures.
Oh, let me get back to it.
Who are they?
What our spiritual lineage looks like. Yeah, I was just sort of to end. Just thinking of, I'd had a while ago, I had a conversation with a couple of order members from Stroud who are not that far away at this very moment, and we were talking about why we wanted to teach. You know, why do we teach Buddhism? Lineage looks like, and maybe this is going to different figures and meet these different order members as well, some of which we know and some of which are coming from other places. A little bit faded.
Yeah,
they are. It's quite traditional about these different figures and meet these different order members as well, some of which we know and some of which are coming from other places, and through the magic of Zoom we are having them. So we just got 5 minutes or so.